might be asking yourself, what exactly are vaccinations? Well, in order to understand what a vaccination is, you kind of need to know a little bit about the immune system. The goal of the immune system is to identify foreign substances and destroy them. The basic components of the immune system include antigens, or foreign bodies, and antibodies, our defense against the antigens. Immune systems are exposed to hundreds or thousands of antigens daily. A vaccine typically contains an agent that resembles a disease-causing microorganism and is often made from a weakened or killed form of the microbe, its toxins, or one of the surface proteins. The antigen from the vaccine stimulates the body's immune system to recognize the disease as foreign, to destroy it, and to remember it so that the immune system can recognize and destroy any of these organisms that it later encounters. In other words, vaccines tell the immune system to gear up against whatever disease is being injected. Current evidence tells us that vaccines not only protect against the specific diseases that they are intended to, but may also affect resistance to other infectious disease. This is called nonspecific effect. Childhood vaccinations are administered as early as possible to assure that infants are protected against diseases that occur in early childhood. In order to get the full scoop on vaccinations, it's important to understand the public perceptions of vaccinations. Most public perceptions derive from cultural predispositions. An internet survey of 1,213 American adults conducted in 2010 suggests that individuals' cultural predispositions heavily contribute to the formation of their perceptions pertaining to vaccine benefits and risks at both societal and individual levels. Other contributing factors include risk perception, knowledge of disease, trust in healthcare providers, knowledge level, and demographic characteristics. Risk perception is also a huge contributor to the public perception of vaccinations. When a person expects greater benefits, fewer risks, and that overall benefits will outweigh risks, he or she will have a greater confidence in vaccinations. On the other side, if the person believes the risks outweigh the benefits, he or she is less likely to vaccinate their child. The benefits and risks of vaccinations are considered both for the individual child and for the community populations. What's the trend? Current areas of the country, including parts of Arizona, Iowa, Michigan, Montana, Utah, West Virginia, Wyoming, and others, vaccination rates and compliance with federal guidelines are relatively low. The trend and its effects appear to be worsening. Recent overall vaccination rates in some communities do not reach 80%, which is insufficient for herd immunity. With the diversity in public perception of vaccines and the increased scientific studies, there has been a divide between pro-vaccination and anti-vaccination. Pro-vaccination activists believe that childhood vaccines are an effective method of significantly decreasing the infant mortality rate by thwarting the spread of deadly diseases. These diseases include smallpox, polio, measles, Hib, meningitis, hepatitis, mumps, rubella, tetanus, pneumonia, influenza, diphtheria, pertussis, and varicella. From the public health perspective, vaccinations prevent epidemics caused by deadly diseases from occurring. At the individual level, vaccinations benefit an infant or child with a healthier life by minimizing the risks of contracting such dangerous illnesses. The opponent, the anti-vaccination movement, derives their beliefs in the risk versus benefit perception. Those who believe that the threat of disease is diminishing and that we are living in a much safer world due to medical advances generally believe that vaccination is much riskier than the disease itself. They believe that there are low vaccination benefits and high risks compared to those who believe that diseases are still a significant threat to children's health. Religious or philosophical reasons also come to play. Of the parents who choose not to vaccinate their children, most do so on religious or philosophical reasons, whereas some decide to avoid or delay vaccination because of a child's serious illness. According to U.S. law, parents hold the final say in the vaccination of their own child. A lot of parents also believe that because many once dreaded fatal infectious diseases have now essentially disappeared in the U.S., vaccinating today's children against them has become redundant. They argue that children can develop a natural immunity to any threatening illness by utilizing a less risky or organic approach. Because vaccines contain toxins in the form of chemicals like aluminum and mercury, anti-vaccine anti-vaccine activists argue that this is too great a risk to a child's growing mind and body. Another aspect to the anti-vaccine movement is thimerosal. Anti-vaccination activists argue that thimerosal, a preservative present in some vaccines, can cause neurological damage and result in the onset of autism spectrum disorders. As supporting evidence, anti-vaccine activists point out that since the late 1990s, diagnoses of autism have increased alongside changes in the national vaccine schedule to require more vaccines for infants and children within a given time. Along with the anti-vaccination movement, you've probably also heard of vaccinations and autism. The reasons this is called attention is because the prevalence of autism has increased over the past several decades. However, it is unclear whether this is due to true increase in the awareness of the disease, or differences in the methods used to assess the prevalence. No clear cause has been identified for autism, although many possible associations have been investigated. Given the increase in its incidence, there has been interest in environmental exposures that may have also increased over the past several decades. One of these exposures, vaccinations, has received widespread interest and attention. An increasing number of vaccinations have become available over the past several decades to protect children against infectious diseases, and many are given at a time period during early childhood that coincides with the onset development concerns related to autism. The rumor started a decade ago with a British researcher who published a paper describing abnormal gastrointestinal features among 12 children who had been referred to their university pediatric gastroenterology clinic. All children had some type of developmental disorder, and in 9 of the children, a diagnosis of autism had been made. In 6 of these 9 children, either the parent or a physician had linked the onset of developmental regression with the receipt of the MMR vaccine. However, these initial reports of a possible relationship between the MMR vaccine and the onset of autism received significant attention, and in England, MMR immunization rates dropped from greater than 90% prior to 1998 to a low of 80% in 2003. In response to this concern, in the United States, the CDC and the National Institutes of Health convened a panel of experts in the fall of 2000 to examine 3 vaccine safety issues, the first of which was the hypothesis of a link between the MMR vaccine and autism. The committee, after performing an in-depth review of the scientific and medical research, rejected a relationship between the MMR vaccine and autism. Similarly, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Medical Research Council both published similar conclusions in 2001 based on the research available. In addition, another study was performed in 2001 that examined trends between autism and vaccinations by comparing rates of autism in England between boys born in 1988, when MMR vaccine was introduced, and those born in 1993. They found that while the rate of autism diagnoses increased almost fourfold, the rate of MMR immunization was fairly constant over that time period. The authors also compared the mean age at vaccination among those with autism diagnosis to the mean age at vaccination among the general population and found no difference. Thimerosal and mercury exposure is also another concern for autism. However, vaccine manufacturers assured the removal of thimerosal from vaccines. By 2001, all vaccines routinely recommended for children 6 years of age and under in the U.S. were produced without thimerosal as a preservative, with the exception of some doses of inactivated influenza vaccine. Today, all vaccines are available without thimerosal, including several influenza vaccine presentations. Like any medication, vaccines can cause side effects. The most common side effects are mild. On the other hand, many vaccine-preventable disease symptoms can be serious or even deadly. Even though many of these diseases are rare in this country, they still occur around the world and can be brought into the U.S., putting unvaccinated children at risk. The side effects associated with getting vaccines are almost always mild, such as redness and swelling where the shot was given, low-grade fever, tiredness, or irritability, and these symptoms go away within a few days. If your child experiences a reaction at the injection site, you can use a cool, wet cloth to reduce redness, soreness, and swelling. Serious side effects following vaccination, such as severe allergic reaction and seizure, are very rare, and doctors and clinic staff are trained to deal with them. Pay extra attention to your child for a few days after vaccination. If you see something that concerns you, call your child's doctor. The CDC is a great resource to look up the specific side effects caused by each vaccination. In order to understand the full importance of vaccinations, it's important to understand the concept of herd immunity. Herd immunity is when a critical portion of a community is immunized against a contagious disease. When this happens, most members of the community are protected against that disease because there's little opportunity for an outbreak. Even those who are not eligible for certain vaccines, such as infants, pregnant women, or immunocompromised individuals, get some protection because the spread of contagious disease is contained. High-risk populations also benefit from herd immunity. Anti-vaccination activists argue that high-risk populations can be protected from these diseases if they are the only ones that receive the vaccine. However, vaccinating only high-risk populations is unlikely to reduce the burden of seasonal epidemics because these groups represent only a fraction of the population among whom the virus spreads. In addition, the attack rates in these groups are relatively low. Another challenge with only vaccinating high-risk groups is that the vaccines may not work as well in these at-risk populations. Herd immunity also saves some serious money. In the U.S., it was estimated that the introduction of the meningococcal conjugate vaccine saved the U.S. $551 million in direct costs and $920 million in indirect costs, including costs associated with permanent disability and premature death. This visualization is a great representation of herd immunity. The first box shows what happens when no one is immunized. The contagious disease spreads throughout the entire population and affects almost everyone. The second box shows what happens when some of the population gets immunized. The contagious disease spreads and still hits a majority of the population. The third box shows what happens when most of the population becomes immunized. The spread of the contagious disease is contained, and only a few people are affected by the disease. So the ultimate question is, do the benefits of vaccines outweigh the risks? The reality is vaccinations decrease the incidence of deadly diseases, but only if they are utilized correctly. In 2010, a total of 27,550 cases of whooping cough were reported, which was a 250% increase from the 7,867 cases in 2000. However, in 2012, there were 41,000 cases reported, which is a significant increase. Measles vaccination has resulted in a decrease in reported measles cases from about 500,000 cases and 500 deaths per year to a few dozen cases each year in the United States. In 2008, however, more than 100 cases were reported due to importations from other countries. Most of these cases have occurred among unvaccinated persons. There are safety measures that healthcare providers put in place to protect your child, so you don't have to worry about the adverse effects of vaccines. Nurses and other healthcare providers are required to record key information, for example, lot number, product, administration site, and method for each vaccine administered, which can be used when reporting a possible vaccine adverse event. Vaccine lot numbers can be used to track unusual patterns within a specific vaccine lot. In addition, if necessary, a provider can identify which patients received a dose of a recalled vaccine. In addition, vaccine manufacturers are required to complete pre-licensing vaccine testing through clinical trials for each vaccine. In addition, vaccine manufacturers are required by the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act to report adverse events to the Department of Health and Human Services. Vaccine manufacturers have a vested interest in assuring vaccines are safe and reinforcing public confidence in vaccines. The Vaccine Safety Data Link includes data from several health maintenance organizations. This database is used to monitor for any possible adverse event from vaccines. Your child's health is your ultimate decision. It is key to remember that literally from birth, infants are exposed to environmental organisms that can cause infection. Delaying vaccines can be risky because it extends the time that infants are susceptible to real diseases that can have serious complications, particularly for the youngest children. Despite concerns about vaccine safety, vaccination is safer than accepting the risks for the disease these vaccines prevent. Unless a disease has been eradicated, failure to vaccinate increases the risk to both the individual and society. The CDC has provided a great chart that shows the schedule of vaccinations. This includes what vaccines the child needs and when they need them. The yellow boxes indicate the age range that the child receives a certain vaccine. The CDC also is a great resource for parents to go to receive more information on vaccinations. This chart is another great example of the resources the CDC has provided parents on vaccinations. Each vaccine is listed as well as the disease the vaccine protects